That's what he really meant to ask, was it?
To answer it in his, the way he thinks, but you can also find an answer for me to make sense of all of that and how much is how much.
Well, I do actually think that, look, I do think that there is an agenda among people that we could call globalists who are basically trying to refashion the whole world in terms of what they have called a Great Reset, which ideally wants to, I think, actually make people slaves to corporations, in the name of a bunch of things, in the name of sustainability and climate change, in the name of equity, which will be a kind of socialism, you will own nothing and you will be happy, and also in the name of inclusivity, basically teaching people that the created order and creation and what creation and scripture teach us about gender and sexuality are wrong, and trying to train us to think and live against creation. So I do actually think there is an intentional movement to change Western societies. I don't call it a conspiracy theory, I call it a conspiracy fact or an open conspiracy, because the documents are all there to see. Patrick, so I do actually believe in all of that. Now, exactly how many people are behind this, that's another question. I mean, there have been all sorts of movements in history that have happened that haven't necessarily been orchestrated by 2 or 3 people. Often what happens is an idea catches on and a bunch of people who are very influential sort of buy into it, and it sort of creates a social movement that sort of generates its own momentum. But I absolutely believe that there is a movement to basically reshape the world accordingly, as I've described, called the Great Reset, called Build Back Better. I completely believe in that. I think COVID was opportunistically used to establish certain surveillance infrastructure, and probably also just to see how compliant populations will be. And I think they'll be jumping up and down with glee after the last 2 years. Now, in terms of sort of managing all the information that's out there and not getting distracted and going down paths that can just really take you away from focusing on the primary things that you should be thinking of. The key to that, I think, is finding a few really, really good sources that are on top of all the information and have already done a lot of their work, as you said, and can interpret it through a sort of Christian lens. One really good American organization is called Truth Exchange. Truth Exchange is an excellent American ministry, and you can find videos and lots of podcasts on their website talking about things ranging from identity, the Great Reset, wokeness, and their people have done a ton of research, and they sort of tie it all together, particularly through a particular passage in the book of Romans, Romans chapter 1, verses sort of 20 to 23, about people exchanging the truth of God for a lie, and so Truth Exchange is very good, and that's the key. And I can even sort of name some other authors, Patrick Wood and his work on the sorts of things that we were talking about in terms of the Great Reset and a coming technocracy. They're very good. But yeah, check out Truth Exchange. But yeah, the key is really not to reinvent the wheel, as you said, but to find really reliable sources who have sort of done it all for you and can give it to you in a really digestible way. And Truth Exchange is very good. And from Truth Exchange, you'll learn about other ministries as well that are doing it really well. And I know Truth Exchange is very good. I trust them. I even do work with them. They're excellent. They're very responsible, but at the same time, they're not afraid of tackling controversial issues like globalism, like the rise of neo-paganism, like identity, like all that kind of thing. And one thing I might just say is that, we're all, some of us are sort of a bit heavy-hearted that, we're going to feel a bit like outsiders among our peer groups and things like that sometimes, not necessarily all the time. But remember, that's because we're sort of heading into the same period that the early Christians were sort of moving out of. The early Christians found themselves in a pagan culture, in a culture that glorified the very things that Scripture tells us to flee from. And so the early Christians felt like outsiders as well. And they created a whole new culture, which lasted for, nearly 2,000 years, probably about 1,500 years. They created a whole new culture. But in some ways, that culture is sort of starting to decline, as we've been talking about. And what's happening with us Christians today is that we're sort of heading back into the culture that the early Christians found themselves in. We're heading into a neo-pagan culture. And that's why you're experiencing sort of feelings of feeling a little bit out of place in society, because we're increasingly heading into the same position that the early followers of Jesus were in. It's not that society is becoming less religious. It's becoming less Christian, but it's not becoming less religious. It's just changing its religion to what we might call neo-paganism, worship of the body, obsession with sex, removing the distinction between the creator and the creation. That's what we're heading into.